Trump will have a difficult time with Gavin Newsom. And that's the scenario. And it's a rope-a-dope right now. Nobody's talking. They're talking about it. But what took so long? Yeah. It was so obvious to me.
Hey everybody, Alex Cohen here. Sara Sadhwani is kicking off her sabbatical. She's back on the East Coast at Harvard this week. I'm wishing her all the best. And in her stead, I have another incredibly smart, sassy lady, Anne Hyde Dunsmore. It's great to have you back with us here on the Inside the Issues podcast.
Good to see you.
We have so much to talk about, including presidential politics and the role that California plays in all of that. Gavin Newsom and what he is up to this week, stumping for Biden in South Carolina. And last but not least, the first official televised debate in the U.S. Senate race to replace the late Dianne Feinstein. Man, oh man, I'm going to try to refrain from my baseball puns, but it's going to be tough. All right, and yeah, because I'll strike out. There you go. Just get it out of my system. All right, let's start with the big political story. The race for the White House, of course, the latest twist and turn in New Hampshire, most folks probably know by now, a significant victory for Donald Trump. But Nikki Haley, I don't know, it's so interesting. I find that there's been so many different takes on her performance. How do you feel like she fared in New Hampshire?
Well, let's talk about how fiscally responsible she is for having controlled her spending, even though she spent quite a bit. Yeah. She has a sustainable amount of money. That's the thing to look at. Yeah. And that she can continue down the primary road for a little bit of time.
Although now Donald Trump threatening anybody who gives her money, saying so you'll be out of the MAGA family.
See, this is what we're going to get to here, is Donald Trump and who he's been for the last few months. And people, I listened to his speech that night, and I was like, oh, he's sounding reasonable. Maybe the little Donald whispers are succeeding. He's going to be more prodigious. He's going to be more of a statesman, I think. And then he went off script.
Oh, yeah.
He went after the dress.
Oh, yeah.
He told everybody not to vote by mail, and which we've been spending years trying to fix as a party because we win through the mail.
Yeah.
The mail-in votes early on. Whoever wins the mail-in votes nowadays is got the role because they can suppress, depress, and repress by the end of the day.
I want to, before you go further, I do, because when you mentioned the dress, and I picked up on that too. By the way, I just got to say, I loved her dress. I thought it was beautiful, but it also shouldn't matter, right? Like, nobody says, oh, did you see, like, Tim Scott's tie or Vivek's blazer? Like, no one says that. And I felt like Donald Trump, consciously or not, knew what he was saying when he was making remarks about the dress, and that gender played a role.
Well, look, he's got political Tourette syndrome, for sure. I've never seen anything like it. And you can know that the staff is sitting in the back of the room going, and now he's continued down that road by doing this thing of blacklisting Nikki Haley donors. Mm. First reaction, from what are you blacklisting them? The Republican Party? Is that what you're doing? Mm. In what method does splitting the Republican vote or shaving off people with words like rhino and if you gave to them, if you're not with me, you're against me. It's like, wow, talk about an open door. And then the third thing is not allowing Republicans or anybody but registered Republicans vote on a ballot. What's this ballot manipulation game? This is a democracy. You qualify, you're on. And why is Biden deciding not to be on? So I'm looking at all of this going, okay, the Supreme Court's going to be kept very busy.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a Supreme Court game.
Oh, so I want to talk a little bit about, the
Did I go off script?
No. I want to go back to, because I think it's so central to all of this. And I think it could probably in the end be one of the most, if not the most deciding factors in 2024. Donald Trump's, his id, right? Like that's, I think, the best way to put it, like that just part of his brain and his personality that I don't think anybody, least of all Donald Trump, can control. I feel like those I feel like we tend to look at this nation and here in California as if it's like your sweater today, black and white, and you've got people who are totally in support of Donald Trump, and they love it when he goes uncuffed and unleashed. That was when he was here in Anaheim last fall for the GOP convention. He was sitting there insulting people in Beverly Hills, saying that they couldn't shower because of the drought and they smelled bad, and people lapped it up and ate it and wanted more. People who don't like Donald Trump hate him even more because of that, and I feel like we pretend that there's no one in the middle. But I do wonder if there are some people who might have been leaning towards Trump who maybe kind of forgot what things were like from, let's say 2016 to 2020, that might still be making up their minds, and they start to hear this guy again and then have, now I kind of remember. It's like, okay, I once dated a guy, I'm not going to name any names, way back in the day, and I broke up with him because he drove me nuts. And then many years passed, and I was like, he wasn't so bad. He was so handsome. He treated me like a queen. And then, like, literally decades later, I went and had lunch with him, and within 5 minutes, I was like, now I remember why I broke up with you. And I wonder if voters might not have that with Trump.
Well, I think what you're watching is behavior and manipulation, and things are a little more transparent. People now know how to react to this stuff because they've seen it before. And there's been so many, analytics done on, the success of these types of behaviors and strategies. And we're going to learn a lot more this year. This is a political science, PhD class right now.
Oh man, yeah.
And I am absolutely watching. I've been watching this train wreck.
Yeah.
There's no primaries on the Democrat side. There's and that comes up when in New Hampshire. We knew this was happening all along.
Yeah.
It was obvious, but nobody talked about it. And it's like what you're watching is both parties contributing to the erosion of the two-party system.
Yeah.
Both parties are, and you see it, and somebody, well, how do you know? Oh, well, because the largest voting bloc in the country is starting to be no party preference.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the few that discern between no party preference versus independent. Independent is a structured party.
Yeah, yeah.
No party preference is basically people flipping off a party intentionally.
Well, I think it's uber. I mean, I've talked about this here before on the podcast that I feel like we have been doing things like Iowa having the first caucus and New Hampshire having the first primary, like having debates, my God, like things that for decades we've done because we've always done it this way, in the same way that we took taxis forever because that's how we did it. And all you need is someone to come along saying, we live in the 2020s now. Is there not a better way?
We're a democracy. We're allowed to explore better ways.
Yeah.
And we're allowed to explore better people. And if you don't want to be seen or heard or understood who you are and what you represent, don't run.
Yeah. Do you think that there are better ways, better people that will come out of all the disruption that we're seeing? Because we're still stuck with two, really old guys, white, in the end, most likely,
right.
Who will be running for this very important position.
I do not discount the opportunities that might be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
And luck is when preparation meets opportunity. Now, I think Nikki Haley is prepared. I also think that Donald Trump is a force to be reckoned with. Yeah. Biden is losing that game without question. And the more Biden loses and the more Trump succeeds, the less Nikki Haley will have to work from. He has clearly decided not to have her part of the team.
Yeah.
I would say at Iowa, I was looking at him going, okay, he could pick her.
Yeah. No,
but
that's not happening anymore.
That's the T-shirt we're going to get next time is going to be, no.
No. Okay, so let's talk about California's role in all of this because, I feel like for years the conventional wisdom is whoever the Democratic nominee is, everyone in this state, or, that's where the delegates are going to go. And that we're just a big ATM. But I feel like there's some interesting stuff going on right now this week. Kamala Harris, did a fundraiser in Manhattan Beach this week saying this is what she's going to be doing for the next 10 months. Nikki Haley, I think it's like 4 fundraisers that she's got coming up here in California. So I also feel like, Anne, in your crowd, the folks who are very much Republicans, very much do not care for Donald Trump, that it's like this giant tug of war between the non-Trump Republicans and and the Trump Republicans. And for quite some time, the Trump Republicans have been winning that tug of war, and that the non-Trump Republicans see this very moment as their last gasp. Like, if we don't fund Nikki Haley, if we don't really do something right now, we will lose it forever. Am I right on that? Are people feeling that way?
Well, they're feeling that way, but whether I'm going to say nothing is forever, especially as the information age progresses to Mach 10.
Yeah.
I think that California is a battleground state unlike any other. And I think it's incredibly underrated for the impact it has on the rest of the country. I think.
How are we a battleground state? Make that case.
Well, okay, so I think that the Republican congressional members in California, of which there are very few. When I got into politics here, we had, I think, 26. We had a majority of the delegation from California was Republican.
Yeah.
I think that the majority. I think all but one or two congressional members in California are in toss-up seats.
Yeah.
For all intents and purposes.
Yeah.
None of them are safe. Maybe there's one or two. Tom McClintock's safe, and Doug LaMalfa's safe, and Darrell Isse is safe. The rest of them are kind of in trouble.
Yeah.
In a very marked way. And the leadership battle didn't help that.
No.
But even Kevin McCarthy would disregard campaigns here that were in trouble because it's so expensive to build the numbers in other states. This is going to be a no-brainer come November. The sacrifice is clear. But I also think that California it's going to be turbulent because I think the U.S. Senate race is going to be Democrat 1 and 2 as it progresses and the candidacies become. I mean, unless Steve Garvey becomes a strategic wonderkind, then I think then that's going to be difficult. And supporting a statewide race here is hundreds of millions of dollars.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit more about that Senate race, because as I mentioned, this week we saw the very first official debate. There's been some candidate forums featuring the three Democrats in this race. Just a little refresher here. All three members of Congress, Adam Schiff, Katie Porter, and Barbara Lee. And then Steve Garvey enters the race. And it's, a lot of people, of course, they mention, it's like when Arnold Schwarzenegger got into politics or when Ronald Reagan. I would argue it's very different because Arnold Schwarzenegger was still very much a movie star. Steve Garvey, the first thing I said was I had a crush on Steve Garvey when I was a little kid and he was a Dodger.
And then when you got older, you got worried because he kind of seemed to be all over the...
Well, yeah. I won't go into that, but I would just say I was a kid a very long time ago. So I just think of him as being yes, he was part of the zeitgeist, but that was a very long time ago. He really does not have much political background in the way that Arnold Schwarzenegger was very politically involved before. He was doing stuff and supporting legislation before he put in his hat. And then you had this televised debate. So I was there at USC on Monday night. I think everyone's so curious to see how Steve Garvey would do. Would he knock it out of the park? Okay, got to get my baseball puns out there. So at the beginning, and I will say, because a lot of people focused on the later stuff, which we'll talk about in a moment, but at the beginning, I think he was a very solid hitter. He talked about California's economy, and he talked about the fact that, so many people were hurting right now. And I think that is a message that really resonates with a lot of people, and not just Republicans, right? Where he got into trouble was because then it kind of went down this road of, do you support Trump or not? And that's been a very hard road for Steve Garvey to walk because he has voted for Donald Trump twice. He's kind of been very mum about what he would do here in 2024. And the three Democrats on that stage really used that as an opportunity to pounce on him. And that's where I feel like Steve Garvey began to unravel a bit. Let's take a listen to what happened in that moment.
I'm my own man. I make my own decisions. I voted for him twice because
we'd like to
I
know,
thought that he was the best person.
as your own man, what is your decision?
Let him answer. It's his turn.
You're banging on that trash can just like the Astros did a few years ago. And as I will continue...
Talk about inside baseball. I mean, first of all, Astros cheating scandal. I kind of remember it because I was in the news, but I think for some people, especially those watching a Senate debate, it might be a bit of a head scratcher. And Steve Garvey had throughout the night these weird moments. He was talking at one point about how he's the only person that really goes out and talks to homeless people. And he said, I touch them. And I know in the media, everyone was like, well, you touch homeless people? Like it was
like
really...
Biden touchy?
Yeah, it was a little weird, right? So everyone, I mean, the folks in the media room were like, oh, that's it. Steve Garvey's, Senate bid is over tonight. But I also have to wonder, again, getting back to that disruption, like how many people were actually watching that debate and how many people will make their decision on that versus I'm a huge Dodgers fan. I'm a Republican. Steve Garvey, I don't even know what he said. I don't even care what he said. Yeah. What do you think?
So a lot of these things are used to create B-roll for future campaign strategic elements, i.e. digital. Or, you'll see these clips forever. And the problem with that for Steve Garvey is he was not really respecting the clock. He was slow, he was plotting, he took too many pauses. That's not going to work in a 60-second spot. Now, that's good for him and it's bad for him. He can't use it, they can't use it. Yeah. So then you kind of look at what he says, like, I wouldn't have voted for Ronald Reagan. Okay, talk about taking something out of context. Why would you say that? Yeah. So I tend, as you know, to look at what you don't see. Yeah. And so I understand why they do it, even though the readership or the viewership or the, all the ships don't necessarily react to that. But it's the repeated use of something that then impacts you. In the primary, both Democrats and Republicans have to play to their base, which is to the far left and to the far right. And they not only have to make those people like them, but they have to get them to vote. So if those people are kind of like, I don't really care, so I'm not really going to vote. Yeah. They can do that on both sides. I think that you're looking at a 1 and 2 situation for the Democrats. Steve Garvey has to show the sustainability. I don't think people will judge him for it, but if he falls to third, it's a done deal. Yeah. Because that's a downward trajectory. Yeah. Katie Porter is the one that I'm looking at going, she's going to be the deciding vote between whether or not Steve Garvey's in second place. Yeah.
She, I would say, of all the candidates on that stage, regardless of what you think of her policy, when it just comes to performance, she was tight, she was concise, she had the zingers. She was the one who said Steve Garvey, once a Dodger, always a Dodger, which I think probably was
but
the
clearly
best
she's running against Steve Garvey, which doesn't say much for her. Yeah. So she's, and by the way, there is nothing worse than a bombastic woman running for office. The voters don't react well to it. It's like, oh, she's just going to be that, and because they're tired of that. Yeah. They're tired of vitriol. So what she can go ahead and be smart and quip and poke. Yeah. But what she shouldn't be doing is interrupting. She has to be a stateswoman. Yeah. And a person. And I think that she crossed a line. At least in the clips that I saw. I didn't watch the whole thing. Yeah. I've seen clips of it. Garvey was too slow. Shifted a shift job. The fact that Katie Porter was really going after Garvey tells me that she doesn't think she stands a chance to get into first place.
Well, Adam Schiff's campaign coffers say a lot. I think it's somewhere in the neighborhood of $35 million now. Yeah. And I can't help but wonder, too, one of my kind of favorite moments of the evening was that, and this has become a big California politics trend, is to have a bingo card. You get to have a bingo card for State of the State speeches and budget proposal. Yep. Anything that Gavin Newsom does is guaranteed to make a good bingo card. So I think the team at Politico, and they were one of the hosts of the debates, Melanie Mason was one of the moderators, and Melanie did a great job, in my opinion. But prior to the debate, they put out a bingo card. And for giggles, I printed it out and I brought it with me. I think I was the only one in the media room who did. And the way that the bingo card works is you put things in there that you think are likely to happen. For example, like a baseball pun will be made. Steve Garvey will mention the Padres, right? Barbara Lee will mention being the lone vote against the war in Afghanistan. And yes, that came up. Adam Schiff will talk about impeachment. Yes, that came up. Democracy is at stake. Yes, that came up, right? And I was So not surprised that, I got bingo within 40 minutes, which is great if I were playing bingo for money. But I kind of wondered, too, because so much it's, Katie Porter mentioning her whiteboard and going after corporations, and Barbara Lee being the most progressive, and Adam Schiff being the best, defense against Donald Trump. And I can't help but wonder, especially if it does wind up being that the Democrat in the 1-2 positions come the general election, is... don't voters want something more? It just feels like the same tape on replay all of the time, but maybe...
Okay, so political strategy is always about repetition. And like it or not, it does embed itself, and people can remember 3 out of 5 things.
Yeah.
And so, by the way, has Newsom endorsed in that race?
I don't think he has yet.
And that's very telling to me. So, I want to get back to him in a minute, too.
Yes,
because
will.
He's my favorite topic. But
your boyfriend.
My boyfriend. He has never asked me out for dinner. It's a very bad relationship.
He's married.
He's taking me for granted. Anyway, and I won't say that I think he has another girlfriend, because that would not.
Hey, let's go down there. Repetition.
Okay. Repetition, 3 out of 5. So you're gonna get that.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that they're staying on script. What they've done is that they pulled this information, and they are to use messages that move the needle by more than 35%.
Yeah.
So the things that they're bringing up about themselves that are good move the needle. Well, and they have proof of that. And the things that they're saying negatively about the other people also move the needle away from those people. And then you want to capture that on your side. You want to be ready to catch that opportunity. So that's what you're seeing.
No, and as much as I am like, oh, come on, guys, please talk about something else other than the things that I hear you talk about all the time. I will say this. Can I tell you a secret, Anne?
Yes.
I got polled myself.
You didn't disqualify yourself?
I know, because I'm like, I am a California
You're more
voter
qualified than anybody.
So but actually, I did disqualify myself for another reason. I was freaking done with this poll. It was I'm not going to mention the organization, but they were very reputable institutions. It said, can we just ask you a few questions? I was like, sure. And this was about the race to replace Adam Schiff in the House, and that is, it's my district. So I was like, sure. So it was asking me some, generic things about where the country's going and blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then it started asking me about the top candidates in this race. And if I knew, it was like a quiz, and it specifically said, don't Google this, don't look this up, just let us know. It's like, what are each of these folks' positions on gun control, on education, whatever. I'm like, oh my God, I'm the political anchor at a news station? I didn't know, and it made me feel dumb. And it took way too much of my time. And I was about 3/4 of the way through, and I was like, nah, I'm not filling out this poll. And it's interesting, because I do wonder, the campaign strategists that are it made me wonder, how reputable are your poll results, even if someone like me isn't going to go through and do the whole thing.
That's a whole political grift right there. But the polling situation as a whole, front page news, New York Times months ago about the big grift in polling. And I've actually worked with consultants who have said, okay, we'll do a poll. What do you want the outcome to be? And that's more what happens than anything else. And then they can say, blah, blah, blah. And, oh, look, I'm, just winning by 5 points, and then your fundraising gets better. That's why they ask the fundraiser, what do you want it to say? And for me, because I'm quasi a campaign manager as much as I am a fundraiser, because the two are pretty closely linked, and I just said, I want to know what it says. I want to know what's actually going on so we can make sure we win. That thing we're supposed to be doing as consultants, we're supposed to make sure we win as opposed to just fill our pockets with money. The grift in politics is unbelievable. Ed Rollins said to me once, if you can't win president with $50 million, don't run. I haven't seen a candidate run with $50 million in forever. And you looked at Gavin Newsom's race here. And that's part of the California battleground discussion, too, another time. But
Well, let's talk about Gavin Newsom, because, as I mentioned, he is out stumping for President Biden this week.
Said he was invited to.
Yes.
I'm on his mailing list, because
you're really good
this.
friends.
Yeah.
So, Anne, I remember, I think it was probably at least 14 months ago, I feel like, that you said to me, Gavin Newsom's going to run for president. And I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever you're smoking these days. But this week on the 538 podcast, right? And they're supposed to be the experts on all things. They were talking about the mechanics of how delegates that Biden has picked up could be reassigned to Gavin Newsom. And the only way, I don't see a world where Joe Biden drops out. And I think the subtext in all of this that no one wants to say, because it's really crass, is looking at the possibility of Joe Biden being physically incapacitated and or dead.
It will be manipulated. And let me just say this, and where's Ed McMahon so I can do my little, Oracle thing. It is the intention and has been for quite some time, and that they will go to convention and not have primaries on the Democrat side. And I use the word go to convention in the loose sense, not the specific sense of going to convention. The Democrats have, their strategy has been ignored by the public and ignored by the media to basically eliminate our right to choose in the primary by not participating in primaries, by not having primaries. Having Gavin Newsom as the standby replacement for Harris has been a reality for quite some time. You can see it in his constant barrage of emails raising money for candidates in battleground states. The latest being, I've been invited to come to South Carolina by the president to help him win South Carolina. This is carefully coordinated replacement strategies. They are going to convention. If Biden can make it and be ahead in the polls, which is looking like a less likely scenario, but Trump can change that in a day. Then Biden, and they can have Gavin Newsom be the vice presidential candidate with him, unelected, but put in that place, nominated and accepted and voted on by a very small majority, a very small portion of the United States will be represented at that convention in the number of delegates. And then they will move to the presidential run. Now, if Biden is still down, Gavin Newsom can be made vice president at convention. The president can bow out with an inoperable brain tumor or just whatever the reason is, it will happen. And then they will create another vice presidential candidate, and by default, Newsom becomes the presidential candidate for the Democrats. Everybody will be confused. There won't be enough time for people to see what he's really done to California, and has every ability to finish the job the Democrats started on bringing this country down to zero. It will be a Newsom and give me a day or two, and I'll tell you who the VP candidate probably will be. And Trump will have a difficult time with Gavin Newsom. And that's the scenario. And it's a rope-a-dope right now. Nobody's talking. They're talking about it. But what took so long? Yeah. It was so obvious to me.
I want to ask you a question, Anne. And I know your disdain for Gavin Newsom is you wear that right out front. I get it. Let's say there was a world that, for whatever reason, you got hired to be that campaign consultant. Like, you're the Gavin Newsom whisperer saying you're going to leave California. I know, just go with me here. You're leaving California. You get to go out and talk to other states, either on behalf of Biden or maybe eventually on behalf of yourself in whatever capacity. What would you advise him to do to actually connect with voters?
Oh, I actually told somebody on the Dem side the other day, I said, here's how your boy becomes a god in California and across the country. Your boy still has executive power in California. He fixed a freeway in 10 days. He cleaned up San Francisco in 3. He has the ability and power and authority to do the following. Lower gas taxes, get lower gas prices to $2.50 a gallon. Initiate legislation to make California an income tax-free state. Do a user tax, and say that you're going to do that across the nation. That you feel that is a prosperity, a formula for prosperity, and I think if you did those two, and put a cap on the amount of money people can be charged per square foot in their home for utilities. particularly in South Orange County, where we have a horrible thing called the Power Authority that gets to tax people based. It's an income-based utility tax for all intents and purposes. If Gavin Newsom did that, or even just one or two of those things, he would become a hero here. If he came out definitively against defunding the police and actively respected our first responders, no stopping. And there won't be enough time to dissect that. Then he can go crown the next U.S. Senator from California. He can go crown the next president, which will be him. But in the meantime, it'll be anybody he chooses to support. He's got the golden ticket right at his fingertips.
Anne Hyde Dunsmore, maybe his folks should be giving you a call. We really appreciate your traveling from the OC to be with us today. Thank you for dropping by.
Thanks for having me here.
The Inside the Issues podcast is a Spectrum News One production. Crystal Goss is our producer. Our senior digital producer is Yasmin Cruz. Nathaniel Leathers is our editor, and the executive in charge of production is Daisy Espinoza.